Welcome back to The Explainer. So glad you could join us, because today we're looking at a literal geopolitical earthquake that is, right now, completely reshaping our world. Let's get right into it. The date is July 9th, 2026. That 3-week Middle East ceasefire, the one everyone hoped was a historic pause, is completely dead. The US and Iran are back to trading direct state-on-state military strikes. Imagine a massive red "canceled" stamp over the whole peace deal. Today, we're going to dig into the ground reports to see exactly how this vanished in under a month, and more importantly, what this chaos means for the entire global system. Now, if you want to know exactly why this matters to your wallet, just look at this number right here, 116. Before the June ceasefire even had a chance to start, Brent crude oil just skyrocketed past $116 a barrel. That number right there, that's the visceral, immediate reaction of a global economy absolutely terrified of losing its Middle East access. When the missiles start flying, that market panic prices directly into the gas pump and your everyday supply chains. We're going to really zero in on why oil prices spiked over $116 during this crisis. Because honestly, understanding the mechanics of that spike is basically the key to understanding the entire conflict. It really is wild when you look at the sheer volatility we're dealing with. Think back to when that peace deal was first signed. Oil plummeted down to a very manageable $73 a barrel. The market finally took a breath, right? Immediate financial relief. But with the truth shattered today, prices are surging aggressively, right back over that $116 mark. Why the whiplash? Well, energy experts like Vitol CEO Russell Hardy are estimating a staggering 1 billion barrels of oil production are just lost, entirely wiped out due to the renewed conflict. When you yank 1 billion barrels out of the global system, to put that into perspective, that $116 price tag isn't a peak anymore. It's the new floor.
So let's look at Section 1, the global economic shockwave. We really need to talk about the macroeconomic fallout here. Right now, as we speak, a massive 20% of the entire world's energy supply is completely surrounded by active military conflict. This is definitely not just some localized border dispute. The International Energy Agency has officially branded the closure of the Strait of Hormuz as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Let that sink in. When 1/5 of the globe's energy is suddenly locked behind a wall of ballistic missiles, that massive supply disruption basically guarantees those insane price spikes we were just talking about. And that creates this crazy cascading global catastrophe. The maritime blockade has triggered a literal grocery supply emergency across the Gulf states, since they rely on that strait for 80% of their food. Desalination plants, which provide like 99% of the drinking water for countries like Kuwait and Qatar, are directly threatened by stray munitions. Over in the UK, the FTSE 100 just took its worst dive in weeks. Airlines are staring down an existential crisis thanks to exploding jet fuel costs. And crucially, Wall Street's Goldman Sachs just bumped the probability of a U.S. recession to 30%. They're warning that if oil stays north of $100, U.S. unemployment could easily hit 4.6% by the end of 2026. This means inflation is going to stick to the economy like glue.
Moving to Section 2, the ceasefire collapses. Let's dig into the geopolitical roots of how we got here. Okay, so this whole diplomatic pause kicked off on June 17 with a memorandum of understanding signed at the Palace of Versailles. Sounds great, right? But look at how unbelievably fast it unraveled. By July 6 and 7, Iranian forces are actively firing on commercial ships. Fast forward to today, July 9, and U.S. President Donald Trump, speaking from the NATO summit in Ankara, just bluntly declared the truce is, quote, over. The fatal flaw in that Versailles agreement? It completely ignored who actually gets operational control of the 21-mile-wide Strait of Hormuz. They left it totally unresolved. So, almost immediately after signing the memo, Iran tried to flex and take operational control of that tiny strip of water by demanding what they called service fees. Basically, they tried forcing international shipping to use their pre-approved Iranian routes. Naturally, when 3 cargo ships flat out refused on July 6th and 7, Iranian forces opened fire. Washington immediately viewed the shakedown as an illegal blockade, a total violation of international law. Within hours, the U.S. Treasury ripped up a sanctions waiver, and U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, got the green light to step in. Which brings us to Section 3, tactical strikes and retaliation. We're now looking at direct state-on-state conflict. Over just the last 48 hours, U.S. CENTCOM has unleashed a sweeping wave of airstrikes against roughly 90 Iranian military targets. It's massive.
The whole strategy here is laser-focused on crippling Iran's logistics and naval capabilities so they literally cannot blockade the strait more. American forces are aggressively targeting heavy infrastructure down in key coastal cities, places like Bandar Abbas and Surilk. And this operation rolled out in 3 very distinct layers. Step 1 was taking out that coastal infrastructure. Step 2 went deep inland, totally obliterating the Aktake-Khan railway bridge in the north. That's a huge deal because it's a vital link on the China-Iran rail corridor. But you've got to look at Step 3. At noon today, the U.S. struck a target right next to the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Now, Iranian state media is saying the facility itself wasn't hit, but just the geographical proximity of that strike, it sends a deafening message to Tehran. Absolutely nothing is off limits. Well, Iran did not back down. They immediately launched what they're calling Phase 2 of their retaliation. The IRGC fired off a huge, coordinated swarm of ballistic missiles and drones, crossing international borders to hit 4 sovereign nations simultaneously. Over in Jordan, they targeted Al-Azraq. In Kuwait, they hit logistics hubs right near Camp Arafat. Down in Bahrain, those missiles directly threatened the actual headquarters of the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. And in Qatar, alert sirens were blaring at Al Udeid Air Base, which is literally the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East.
And this military escalation is being matched with some seriously intense rhetoric. Check out this chilling ultimatum from the IRGC. If the United States retaliates again, every remaining American base across the Middle East will face heavy fire. Iran's parliament speaker completely echoed that, declaring the quote-unquote era of bullying over. Guys, this isn't just standard political posturing. It's a stated explicit willingness to ignite a region-wide conflagration, which is exactly the kind of nightmare scenario pushing oil to $116 a barrel.
Let's head into Section 4, a dangerous power vacuum. The internal chaos driving all of this. The historic backdrop to today's conflict is literally playing out as we speak. Millions of Iranians are gathered in Mashhad today to bury Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Now remember, Khamenei was assassinated back on February 28th during those initial joint U.S.-Israeli decapitation strikes that essentially kicked off this entire war. His death didn't just take out a leader, it completely shattered a deeply entrenched political system that he had fiercely controlled for over 3 decades. Which naturally leads us to a massive, lingering question. Where in the world is his designated successor, Mojtaba Khamenei? By design, power was supposed to transfer completely seamlessly to his son. But current intelligence reports are suggesting Mojtaba was actually severely disfigured in that exact same February strike. He is entirely missing from public view. He hasn't been seen once during any of these days-long funeral processions. And that vanishing act creates a genuinely terrifying reality on the ground. The Revolutionary Guard is currently operating with unprecedented autonomy. Just think about what that actually means. With the top of the command structure either dead, incapacitated, or just hiding, there is zero civilian or religious check and balance left. You basically have a rogue military wing operating with the sheer authority to just launch ballistic missiles at U.S. bases. The risk of a simple miscalculation leading to a nuclear escalation, it's literally higher right now than at any point in modern history. And that takes us to our final section, Section 5, teetering on stagflation. Let's look at the severe economic reality. $1,113 billion. That is what the United States has already dumped into a war that is showing absolutely zero signs of ending. The diplomatic back channels, they are completely dead right now. You've got an Iranian regime essentially operating blind, fueled by this need to avenge their assassinated leader. Meanwhile, Western central banks are just paralyzed, watching that $116 oil price tag threaten a return to brutal 1970s-style stagflation. This harsh economic reality is exactly why resolving the physical fighting in the Gulf is inextricably linked to the basic survival of businesses and families thousands of miles away. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought, especially given President Trump's recent comments hinting the U.S. might just, quote, finish the job. What does finishing the job actually look like in a theater with a headless military command and a full 20% of the world's energy supply at risk? In an environment totally surrounded by ballistic missiles and stealth fighters, igniting a fire to finish the job could spark an inferno that burns way beyond the borders of the Middle East. The ceasefire has failed. The escalation is live. I really encourage you to look deeper into the supply chain reports we cover today, because understanding this data is your best tool to prepare for what's coming next. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next explainer.